bunch of bench records, and Christy has like all the records.
Yeah.
What's that?
Welcome to the Elite FTS Table Talk Podcast with your host, Dave Tate.
All right, so we just roll? Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll just go off what you just said. You said the women in your gym have all the records and now you guys suck. Is that true?
There's some pretty strong women in our gym. So Christy Hopkins is like, I think at this point she holds all squat, bench, deadlift total records for her weight class.
Okay.
And she just keeps kind of pushing them a little higher. So yeah, she's definitely the best, for all these all the lifters that are. I mean, what can you say about that?
Huh. So he doesn't train hard anymore and you're done. You're broke. So you're broken, he don't train hard. And then they're the ones that are kicking ass.
Hey. No, I mean, Christy and I, both our last meets was the slingshot record breakers in November, and she already had, I think, two or three of the world records. She broke all three of those and the deadlift one, which she didn't have. So it was like 4 for 4.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
There's a significant part of that conversation you left out, which was how did you do?
Oh, I did pretty well. So the one world record I tried to break was I went in sleeves. It was a wrap meet, but I went in sleeves and tried to break the world record there. So I had hit 8:37 in training like a couple weeks before, which would have been a world record. I tried it for my third, and I didn't quite get it. But I made all three of my benches, all three of my deadlifts. Third deadlift was a meet PR with 860. So bench was a post-injury PR because I had 501 before, but then I tore my tricep off, and so I've been building it back up, and I got 457 at that meet for a 2111 total.
So you just got to put all the shit together now.
Yes.
That's the fun part of the sport.
Oh, yeah.
Got to put it together yourself and not the surgeon. So
Yeah.
Yeah. The surgeon did his job. I got to do mine.
Yeah. The tricep's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. If I go into some of the questions that we were asked on Instagram, the first one I see that got marked here to answer was, how do I get stronger at 41 years old? So either one of you guys take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The first thing I think of, because I train people of all different ages, is, the training just has to have the same system whether you're younger or older. The trick is doing just enough to make some progress and not doing so much that you can't sustain it. I think the same strategies of kind of handling enough heavy weights to kind of challenge your your CNS or your technique, doing enough volume of basic compound lifting to build up work capacity and strength and size, and doing enough sort of isolated lifts to keep everything healthy and keep everything progressing. It's just it's just a scale. So, if you're more experienced or less experienced or older or younger, it's really just what can what's enough to make you progress, what's too much that's going to make you probably get hurt or just stall out the progress.
Age is kind of a tricky thing because whenever I see a question like that, first thing that goes to through my head is, well, when do you start? Because 41 years old, if you started competing when you were 13, you got a lot of wear and tear under you. If you started when you were 35, all-time world records have been broken by people who are 45 years old.
Absolutely. And what's your athletic background,
too? Now, age definitely does have a detrimental factor at a certain point. There's a tipping point, but I don't think it's 40.
I don't either. So I've had people ask me that question in person, and what I always say is that, and I'm thankful for, is that I think strength and muscularity is kind of the last physical capacity to go. I think things like agility, reaction time, those are kind of the first things to go when you see tennis players and gymnasts peak at 20. But you've seen, the last Mr. Olympia, Sean Roden, was 43 years old. Stan Efferding was breaking records into his mid-40s. So
I think if there is a number to throw out there, I think it's definitely in the 50s.
Yeah.
I started competing when I was 13, and it wasn't, granted, muscle tendon issues, common shit that I would say happens in powerlifting. I didn't start really fucking falling apart until 45, but that's starting at 13 with really no breaks. So there's a lot of wear and tear and a lot of stupid ass training too, that kind of went into that as well. And that's the joint issues, the hip replacements and that kind of stuff. That's what I think from a long-term perspective, if you're in this game for a long time, I think everybody's kind of looking down that tunnel, especially if there's any genetic predisposition. It's just win, but, and most people accept that, they just don't really understand it. But 41, it's not even close to even thinking about. I mean, Louis squatted I still don't fucking understand this because I'm not 52 yet. Yeah. Louis squatted 920 at 52 years old. I mean, when I was in my prime training, I was training with him, and he was 52. I'm fucking 52. I got titanium hips. I can't move my fucking arm. How in the fuck did he do that?
Yeah.
I mean, Jennifer Thompson's like in her 40s, early 40s, right? And she's like the best female lifter in the world. It's obviously not slowing her down. So,
but to touch on what you were kind of said a little bit, self-awareness is huge. I think the younger people can learn that, the better, because training economy, that's basically what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is, not doing stupid shit, which, I mean, sometimes we're going to do just because that's what we do. But for me, at least for a lot of years, it was what I thought I had to do every single time I went into the gym.
But you also see like someone like Louis where he's just really regimented, or not Louis, I'm sorry, Ed Cohn is just really regimented, so it's like you got a program, you just stick to the plan. And
the funny thing with that is
it's like you're stringing together good training cycles one after another after another, and then it adds up over time.
As I've gotten
easier
older,
said than done.
As I've gotten older, I see that as actually more disciplined and more hardcore than the guy that's whacking his head on the bar going fucking ape shit every time he goes into the gym, because that's hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. it's walking a tightrope, basically. Yeah. And that's something I'm trying to learn myself. And a thing that I tell people also, like one of my favorite sayings in life is the perfect is the enemy of the good, and so where if you're striving to have the perfect workout, you're always going to fail. But if you're trying to have a good, good workout, that's a reasonable goal and expectation. So I think just too many people get the paralysis by analysis, and especially if they think, oh, I'm 41, I have to do everything perfect. Well, then you're not even going to start.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, and like, what's the perfect workout? Does that mean that if you have a perfect workout today, then like the meet that's coming up in 6 weeks, you've already ensured like you're going to make your PRs? No. So matters. A good workout means you got a good one. You kept getting good workouts strung together. What is it going to take to hit the PR you want in the meet today, the next day? And it's like, that's, when you're, it's kind of like, to me, it's like the training ADD. It's like, oh, I feel good today. Let me max out.
You kill it.
And is that going to work every time? Obviously, not every time. At some point, doing that too much is like setting you back,
You guys are working with lifters in your gym, and I'm starting to see this more with some of the not younger, but intermediate beginner lifters. I have some that, how you got the arousal curve, right? Yes. Where I got some that I'm just trying to teach how to get batshit crazy and use it, and sometimes, I mean, it's getting in their face, screaming, making them do stupid shit because they got to realize they're capable of doing that stupid shit. But then you got other ones that do it all the time, and then they end up just frying their nervous system or however you want to define it, and they can't recover. So what strategies do you try to do with the ones that because you can kind of see, at least I can, you can see, and actually I can see in somebody's eyes if they're going to make the weight or not before they even try. You can kind of tell. So what have you found successful in trying to mentor that or to teach that?
I think one thing that's good when you have a gym where you have a lot of strong people that train with, a variety of people is you can sort of set the tone, kind of like leading by example. That's great because then, when the younger lifters or the more novice lifters are looking up to other lifters in the gym, they're going to emulate what they're doing. And that's like, obviously you don't want to be the guy who tells everyone this is how you should train and then you do it totally different because you're special now. Mm-hmm. I think, the way you explained it, like I like to just kind of understand some concepts. And so that's where I'm trying to explain it. I've always felt like people who get into weightlifting, there's two kinds of people. There's people who go to the gym and they push themselves maybe too hard, and then there's people that are too cautious and maybe they don't push themselves enough. I feel like in the beginning, those people probably don't get anywhere, and they get kind of, they get kind of over it, and they quit.
Yeah.
But then the people who push really hard, eventually they start getting some backlash from pushing too hard, and then you kind of break that off into people who are smart enough to figure out how to strategize their training, and people who just keep hurting themselves, and then eventually they quit.
Yeah, I found very few advanced lifters that I've ever had to push forward.
Right.
It's always trying to get them to back off.
Yeah, pulling on the reins.
Yeah, I mean, there's always an exception to that, but it's really, really rare. It's more like, okay, man, you gotta.
But that's it. Like a lifter, a competitor should be, they should believe they could do anything. A coach should be like, let's strategize.
Yeah.
And it's hard, if you're trying to pick your own attempts and you're thinking, what can I do? Well, that's not as good as feeling like you could do anything and have somebody who's objectively watching you pick the weights you should do. It's like, it's like you have that confidence, but at the same time try to, evaluate what I can lift. That's kind of playing both sides. So
I think finding that balance is super key. And I think with a lot of aspects of sports psychology, which like you were talking about, the inverted U of the arousal curve, it's just a basic understanding of that. Like I would tell a person that exact thing and explain that to them, because a lot of people don't know that. Same with anxiety, because I've had people ask me, how do you deal with nerves before a lift? And, and I explain how, well, some of it is good, because if you have no, if you're not feeling any kind of excitement, then you're not going to perform well. But it's an inverted U as well. If you have too much, it's going to hurt you. So, and it's up to you to kind of find your path and find where the tip of that inverted U is for you, because it's going to be different for different people.
Well, you being a firefighter, you also have to deal with this at work, right?
Oh, yes.
There's got to be times where you're going into a situation to where your adrenaline, starts firing, and do you have to tell yourself, bring it down, because you fuck up, you dead.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think more and more departments are getting much smarter about training and focusing on things like tunnel vision and the adrenaline dump and things that happen that can, in some ways, enhance your performance, but in other ways be detrimental to your performance. And so that's where training under as realistic a condition as possible really helps you kind of develop that motor learning, that when it actually happens, you already kind of have a neural pathway going to do it.
So more visualization, or just acting, practicing type thing?
Yeah, practicing, as realistic as possible. I mean, so even the Fire Academy, we do burn cell training. So we've been exposed very close to a fire. And so you learn how your gear is going to protect you, and what it's going to feel like, and things like that, and how the fire is going to behave. Same with on the law enforcement side, training with simunition rounds that'll show you where hits are happening with ink, as opposed to just toy guns that aren't firing anything, or even pellet guns where you don't actually see where the hits are going to be. So that's just you make the gun feel as much like a real gun as possible, the same weight, the same trigger pressure, all that stuff, just to make it as realistic as possible.
Now, Dan said something earlier about that I totally agree with, that I think is not underutilized, but misunderstood, is having advanced lifters in the gym that know what they're doing essentially are the role models for how you're to behave. Because I'm sure there's times where you guys are in the gym and you get a little fucking nuts, but it's not every single time that you're going in there. So the up and comers are going to emulate that. So the question, I guess, more to Dan, being that it's your gym, and you're not 50 or 60 at this point in time, but at some point in time, you're not going to be able to be the guy to do that. So how have you thought about that at all? What are you going to do when you can't fill that role?
I haven't really thought about that much. I mean, I've always just kind of gone with the flow. I mean, I've thought about, what I want to see for the gym in the long run.
Yeah.
But I think I've always just kind of wanted to lead by example. And that doesn't mean that I need to actually be lifting the heaviest weights. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if I'm still in there training and I'm still training other people and helping other people, there's still going to be plenty of people to kind of set the tone.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I think the gym itself has its own kind of identity in that sense, because people train together. It's it's not like a commercial gym where everyone just comes in and trains on their own and they're like doing their own photo shoots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are training together. There are people who are training for the same meets, you know. Sometimes more than like a dozen people in the gym are training for the same meet. And so I think that whole vibe, like people really see it, especially like the last month building up to a meet when the people you can see they're a little more serious. The focus is a little bit more intense. Not that it's not intense before, but when the weights start to, you know, you start to think like competition's coming up, you know, I got to, you know, these workouts are like tangibly going to tell me where I'm at, you know, what to expect. And, you know, so they mean, you know, it's like they're kind of getting you excited because, all right, this is going to be fun. I'm getting stronger. You know, so that whole, I think that environment is great.
So from a business takeaway would be those people that have powerlifting, strength training, you know, I don't want to say you have a strict powerlifting gym, but, you know, a serious strength training gym. Whoever the owner is or whoever's setting the example is being the most vested into that should always be working on trying to make people better than they are, because that's the only way you're going to survive.
The best thing hands down, I think, for the overall vibe of the gym is that people are competing in meets.
Yeah.
New people who think, oh, I don't really have any interest in competing. I would never compete. You just get them in there, you know, you know, whether it's me or my wife Sparkle, like you convince them and just, you know, it makes them comfortable and they do it. And then they're like really excited. And then it's like, I mean, you know how it is. If you're not competing in a meet, do you care about your training as much as when you're when you're training for a meet? When you're training, you're like, I don't, you know.
Well, I'm sure you know as well.
A lot of people are afraid to embarrass themselves, and a lot of people, you know, now all of a sudden they're like really psyched up, and so
we could probably name off gym owners that are threatened by people who lift in their gyms because they start to become stronger than they are. So kind of what you're saying and what's being echoed through this conversation is you can't be that person. If you want your gym to succeed in the long run, you can't be that, because those are the people you need.
I mean, I was definitely fortunate in the beginning where, you know, because I've competed and I've had a lot of success setting some records, people want to come to the gym because of me, and that's great. But I've also known from the long time, I'm like, you know, I'm not going to be the strongest guy forever.
Yeah.
And I want the gym to have its own identity, not Dan Green's gym. It's Boss Barbell, you know. So that's always been a thought that I've had is like, you know, where's the direction of the gym? It's not my gym. It's the gym. It's everyone's gym, you know. So, and when we have the meets, it's not just a matter of the individual like focusing on their training more and the training meaning more, but, you know, we call it a meet because it's a chance for everybody to meet up and lift together. Do you want to go and test your maxes like by yourself? No, that's kind of lame. No, you want to meet up with all your friends, maybe all the people that train in the morning or meeting up with the people that train at night. Everyone gets to see where they're at. I mean, it's just a great vibe for the gym. I mean, I think it just makes people really happy, and that's a really valuable thing. I mean, you want to do something that's not just a workout, you know, it's giving you like a benefit physically, but it's also like, I mean, people like the gym because it's just fun socially. So
the culture.
Yeah.
How long have you been training with Dan at his place?
About 5 years now. So my first meet was February 2014, and then roughly a month later I joined.
Why did you do that? What was the deciding factor?
The deciding factor.
It was actually a mutual. I have a friend, this older dude named Dan.
Yeah.
And he would come and train at our garage sometimes, and he was one of the funniest, craziest guys. And like, he told me, I ran into him at the gas station after I haven't seen him in a while. He ran up to him like a couple months ago, and he told me that he was the one who, you know, talked to Andrew at 24, and he's like, you got to go here. And so.
Yeah, it was him and actually like at least two other people, all within, you know, a few weeks of each other, who had seen that I was getting ready for my first powerlifting meet, and they were saying like, "Oh, have you heard of Dan Green?" And you know, and so eventually enough people told me, and I thought, well, I'll go check it out, and I did, and you know, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I remember when he was starting training. You know, he was a wrestler before, so he had like a lot of upper body muscle and strength, and like not a lot of lower body strength, relatively speaking.
But mentality.
But I remember when he first was like hitting, you know, sets with like 660 on the squats for reps, and that was where he was at, and it was like progress, and also like, you know, getting over 400 on the bench. So going from 660 to over, you know, 800 and 900, and you know, benching from 400 up to like 500. So Not to mention, I mean, I don't remember where your deadlift was at when you started, but now 880 was like the best in the gym and 860 in the meet. So
Yeah, my first meet I did, I think 635 or something like that. So yeah, I was very very raw. Like I didn't have a belt. I had Converse All Stars and I had an old wrestling singlet, and that was basically it. So yeah.
And so now you're still wearing Converse and wrestling singlets and
No.
you added sleeves and a belt.
I added some sleeves, yeah, and a belt for sure. Yeah, upgraded. Even some elbow sleeves sometimes because my elbows start hurting. But
the weights, the heavier weights feel heavier, so
Yeah,
yes, they do.
I'll jump to a training question here. So we didn't really get off track, but we expanded on this one. This one I'm gonna generalize kind of what's going on here. They're asking about deficit pulls, block pulls, but I think the basis of the whole question is with your programming, you do a lot of compound movements and not really a whole lot of more isolation type movements like the 45-degree back raise, hamstring curls, reverse hypers, other things that are listed on there. So the question is more along the lines of why do you do that? Kind of self-explanatory, but I'll let you explain that.
I mean, the thing for me is I need to work on what I do is I use the compound lifts that sort of change the leverages, and I like to build up a lot of volume with those because I feel like the training volume on like reps, sets of like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I feel like that's conducive to building dense muscle, and it builds up enough volume, which is kind of critical for building muscle and therefore strength. Like if I want my back squat to go up and I just do a bunch of back squats, for me, the problem is I start just relying on my back strength too much. It's not the best way to build the back strength. It's not the best way to build the leg strength for me. So if I do other lifts like front squats or safety bar squats or, like these are good ways, or paused high bar squats, these are a good way to build the quads for me. Better than probably just the regular squats. And if I do good mornings and stiff leg deadlifts, these are good ways to build my back strength, probably even better than just the back squats. So I put in a lot of volume on these lifts, which I kind of cycle from time to time and identify as lifts that are going to target my weak points or even, strong points, but build them up better than the big lift. And I want to do the big lifts enough so that I'm like confident and proficient, and I can handle the big lift should optimize your strength. So that means, how wide do you stand? How much do you sit back or stay upright? Those kind of things just adjust like how much of a balance you're putting on the different joints and different muscles. So you want to use the optimal one to lift the most weight there, but you also want to build up each leverage point kind of individually. And that's how I look at it. And if I just did the main squats over and over again, I feel like I would just stagnate anyway. Like I said, I would always use my back too much once the weights got harder or heavier.
For context, how would you define volume? I know it's kind of a weird question, but some people will define it as being sets times reps is total volume, where workload would be sets times reps times weight is workload. So when you're speaking about volume, are you speaking about the total tonnage, or are you speaking about total repetitions? Just to put some context behind your definition. It's people interchange how they use it.
Sure.
It's just, as an answer like this, I think it's important for people to know exactly what context.
I mean, I basically start off by thinking of sets and reps.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't really count like if I do a couple hard sets of 5 as part of a workout and I did warm up sets of 5, I don't really count the warm ups, and I don't really count it that much. So if I'm saying I'm going to do like 3 sets of 5, there's a bunch of warm ups probably, and then there's 3 like meaningful sets. I think it's important to make sure there's enough volume so you're not just going heavier and then like losing volume. That's kind of where the traditional linear periodization kind of falls away. Is there not enough volume after?
Yep. So
with the compound lifts, I try to use those in certain rep ranges because I feel like that's going to give me the best improvement in strength, in dense muscle and strength. So I think about it in sets and reps, and the weight is it's kind of, if I'm lifting with the, what I call intensity, where I'm doing hard sets and I'm trying to push more than I did last week, then I don't really think about it as like just the weight or the percent, but really more just sets and reps.
All right. That's how I was always taught, is volume is the sets and the reps, and intensity is load. And you mentioned linear. which is your example of using that is an example of what you're talking about is perfect, because what happens there is there's, a sharp increase in intensity with a drop in the volume. Where if you were to look at workload, that may not necessarily be the case, because if you're doing 2 heavy singles and it's a huge weight, that could be more than really, really light sets.
Yeah. So I think about it as like,
10.
Linear is part of the program. I think there's a benefit in linear where if you go a little bit heavier on the main lift every time, assuming that you're using that opportunity to build in practice, so you're, getting better with your form, and you're not just going through the motions, but you're actually moving the weight with the force that you would, like in the context of at the meet, you're going to try to lift a new max.
Yeah.
So if I'm lifting at a certain percent, I'm lifting it like it's a max. So that gradually allows me to kind of build up towards the weights I want to lift at the meet. But I don't need necessarily a lot of volume on the main lifts. I just need to kind of get to where I feel I'm going to be ready to lift the big weights. But the volume comes from the secondary lifts a lot of times.
An interesting thing with programming that, I look at things differently than other people sometimes, and I laugh at stupid shit that I come up with. All programming, if it's block, conjugate, concurrent, whatever Western method of periodization, whatever type of periodization, they all should be fucking linear, because if they're not, what's the alternative?
Right,
You stay the same.
The
or
goal
go
is
backwards?
to go up. Yeah.
I mean, if you plotted it out over a period of a year, it better be fucking linear the way that things are moving.
Yeah.
I think that gets forgotten too when people get into their little, debates about this methodology or this methodology. It's all irrelevant. The key methodology is you need to get stronger, and there's commonalities amongst all of them.
And I think there's another question in there about like kind of setting goals and stuff for a meet or for, phases or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot, actually. And that was kind of a good question. What I think about is like, if I'm going to, let's say in 20 weeks or something, I have like a meet that I want to compete in. It's a lot of time. So I don't want to just think about maxing out every day for 20 weeks. I want to think, what is it going to take to kind of get to that point where I'm going to be stronger so I can expect to hit a real max at the meet. And so, when I'm, maybe a certain number of weeks out, I want to start sort of with the heavy, like let's say a back squat, I want to start picking what weights I might be doing for each week to kind of build up towards that. That would just be the kind of the first exercise. Maybe every week, maybe it's every other week.
So you're
just so it's
taking it
enough
down
to kind of get
weeks
the practice.
or
But
bi-weekly.
Before I get closer to the meet, I want to see what's the indication that I've actually gained some strength and muscle. And so for me, that's where exercises that I do for certain rep ranges, like stiff leg deadlifts or good mornings or front squats, if I'm doing these all for like sets of 5 or 6 or something, if I increase my 5 rep max on one of those, to me that's meaningful, because it wasn't just like luck, like I had a good day. It was really, I had to put on some muscle to do these lifts, which are kind of like targeting certain areas harder. If I increase those ones, then I know I've gained some muscle, and I should expect to be able to be stronger. It's like if I have a stronger back, measurably stronger legs, there's no reason why my progression in the main lift shouldn't come out higher than before. And that's kind of the way I look at it. So I might say, okay, well, I want to kind of set like checkpoints, which are that these sort of like lifts that indicate strength. I want those to go up, because that's kind of, and I've found over the years which lifts are really meaningful for me.
I think that's key in that. In a way, it kind of echoes, West Side with max effort work or whatever it's going to be. It's during my time competing, it didn't really matter what time of the year it was. Just I had certain indicator lifts that I knew. And if it was quote unquote off season, I knew I can't let anything fall less than 90%. If it falls less than 90%, I'm fucked. I gotta focus just on getting that back up, because it's too hard to get it back up. And I called it a starting line. Like 16 weeks out is the starting line. So I knew kind of where I had to be 20 weeks out, 24 weeks out. It's like you kind of know how weak you're allowed to let yourself. And injuries fuck it up too. It really does. With the injuries, you're like, oh shit. Because now you got to scramble. Like how can I maintain this and that to be able to, get back to what that is. But the takeaway is, for you, it's things like the stiff leg deadlifts, the block pulls, the front squats, things that you do that you have found work for you. I think those listening that are powerlifters need to find what works for them and create their own key indicators.
Yeah.
And then they'll know, I mean, hell, even if you get hurt 8 weeks before a meet and you got to back off the squats, but you can still do your other stuff, you still kind of know what you can squat. Based upon your front squat, all your other stuff. It's like, if this heals, I'm good to do this. Where if you didn't have those key indicators and something happened, you're at a complete loss because all you did was squat, bench, deadlift. You didn't have any other indicators, and they pull out of the meet where it could have been the best meet they ever had. So do you have key indicators that you've established, or are they kind of fall on the same lines as Dan's?
They're pretty similar to Dan's. I pull conventional, and so a deficit pull is a big indicator for me.
How deep?
It's the old school block we have. It's like 3 inches, 3.5.
It's like a little over 3 inches.
So that's just the one I've always used. In the last year and a half, I think we've started using a mat sometimes, which is more like 1.5 inches.
On top of that?
No.
Instead.
How much you weigh now?
They're going down to the basement. Yeah. So I find that. Front squats for sure. Safety bar squats are kind of almost a good indicator on both ends, because the back and thoracic strength for a deadlift, but also the leg and hip strength for a squat. So I think another aspect of it is just the confidence aspect too, where if I'm either not going as hard in the primary lift, or I'm just stalling, but say I put 30 pounds on my front squat, I'm going to feel a little more confident about my back squat, just looking at that. So the way I like to put it is I like to, set PRs, where I can find them. And sometimes you got to find them, in one of those lifts or even an accessory lift, just to give you that mental edge.
Have you found in your gym that they say the front squat and the deficits carry over to most of the people in there?
Well, here's the thing. I think for a lot of people, yes, and a lot of people, no. Because I think, front squats have a little bit of a learning curve, especially some people. Yeah. They don't want to kind of go and really address the flexibility issue to do them well. So when I started doing them, what I really found is that every training cycle that I would do them, I would not only get stronger, but I would also get better in my form, and then the progress would actually be better. So as opposed to this concept of newbie gains.
So yeah, more neural.
It was actually I was getting better and making better progress.
Yeah.
Because I was actually mastering. So I think about every lift, whether it's a delt lateral raise or a curl, or if it's your back squat, or if it's a stiff leg deadlift or something like that. You're only getting as much out of it as you can kind of use it effectively. So it's like a tool. It's great to have great tools at your disposal. I mean, you guys have 1,000 different bars at the gym, but if you don't know how to use it, does that mean you're going to get a lot out of it? Maybe, and maybe not. Some things have a easier learning curve than other things. So that's where I think the front squat's a great exercise. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but some people pick it up really well, and for some people it kind of exposes them right to the problems they have. For other people, the pause squats are really great because, what do most people want to do? They just want to go fast and muscle through.
How do you
tip forward a little bit, muscle through, and it's
where do you have them pause, and how do you teach? Do they pause on the way down, or do they pause on the bottom, or do they pause when they slightly come up? Where do you have them pause?
Normally it's just pause at the bottom, so kind of just right around parallel, maybe a little bit below that.
Okay.
And yeah, because it just, to me, the pause squat, usually we'll have them do a tiny bit narrower than a wider stance and a high bar. So it kind of takes away all the advantages of your back and your hips, and it just forces you to kind of control the weight more with the legs and the back. So to me, that really helps both with the strength and the form, but the form is critical because if you squat more and more and more, but you're always kind of falling forward at the bottom, then it's no matter how much strength you build in the sort of the 90% of the range of motion, that's the top 90%. If you're always throwing yourself out of position at the bottom 10% of the range of motion, how much of a carryover is all your training going to give you? It's going to be small.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, I'm not using my strength because I'm losing it mostly on, losing my position at the bottom of a squat. Well, if I spend a lot of time focusing on the bottom of a squat, to me, it makes sense. I'm going to gain strength out of it.
And confidence,
and I think
as well.
That's one where doing a high bar squat is an easier learning curve than front squats for a lot of people. A lot of people are flexible enough where they can do the front squats no problem. but they're hard because they're not
Yeah.
strong at them, which is perfect.
Yes.
It's a perfect reason to do them. But I think everything has to have a progression. I've been having a lot of my clients do good mornings, which at first I was just like, I need to make sure my clients don't get hurt doing this.
Yeah, it's a scary
But what
thing.
people have to think about is like, I think, any exercise can be done where you start off at the right weights, the right volume, and you just gradually build it up. That's the patience and kind of what you have to do. And eventually those really hard moves become very beneficial as, giving you a carryover. Whereas you can do other lifts, like a back squat, which should be normal and safe, but you do it too much with too bad a form, and all of a sudden that hurts you. So.
And then you reinforce bad technique on a competitive lift.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the whole point of like, do enough to make progress, but don't overdo it where you're getting ahead of yourself. Whether it's, I think that's really for like any like way you look at the training, whether it's the whole like, training protocol or it's just one exercise.
Mm-hmm. What would be your key indicator lifts for the bench press then?
I think for different people that varies a lot, but I think that's one where you have to find it. And there's so many exercises you just need to, like for me, I like, incline bench. I like shoulder pressing. I like dumbbell pressing. I like dumbbell bench.
That's a funny point that you brought up, because there are
you can't do them all.
There's so many movements where with squat and pulls, it's I'm not going to say it's limited, but you don't have, it's like you can squat, you can good morning, you can pull. There's what the fuck else are you going to do?
I think with the squatting, a lot of it comes down to your skill level, which is comes from practicing the same things like enough. But I think benching, the technique for benching, I don't think is as complicated. And I think the trick is getting bigger and more jacked. You need bigger arms and chest and shoulders. You can execute better technique, but that's not going to get you a 500 or 600 pound bench.
True.
Only by gaining muscle. That's kind of where I look at it, as like, it's a lot like bodybuilding. I mean,
yes.
The other thing, and just as a personal thing, why would you want to bench a lot and not look like it either? So,
well, aside from that, you make a good point, because another critical factor I think in benching big and benching well is to be able to stay tight.
Yeah.
But you can't flex bone. You know what I'm saying? You can't flex skin, and you can't flex fat. So the only way you can get tight is to have muscles to actually make tight. And while you could be teaching, or I could be, or any of us could be teaching somebody how to bench press and how to pack their shoulders and get everything tight, how to tighten their lats. If they don't have any fucking lats, what are they going to get tight?
Right.
Their triceps. Yeah. They got to build the shit up, and then it starts. So it is. You're 100% correct. It's bodybuilding repetition type of work, which is, it's odd because it's so vastly different than the squat and deadlift that it's like higher rep protocols work better, and where the squat and pulls, it's like singles, triples, maybe fives if you have your inhaler that day.
Well, it goes to the point, if we say like technique is paramount, well, technique divides into sort of like, the concept of doing it. Like if I give you an empty bar, does your technique look right? But now when we put more and more and more weight on, what causes you to fail to execute the technique? Well, that would be a lack of strength. So if you can't stay tight because your lats don't have the strength to stay tight once the weight gets up to a certain point, well, now your technique fails because you're weak. And that's where I think with the bench, once you can execute the technique properly, you just need to get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
With the squat, there's a lot of that too, but there's also just a lack of execution of, you can give somebody an empty bar or like, one or two plates if they're kind of a bigger guy, and it can still be a pretty ugly squat, and you put a lot of work in with poor form and you don't get quite as much back on the return.
I've also found with the squat, I haven't found this with the deadlift, but with the squat, if you take somebody's beginner intermediate and their form is, just say it's a clusterfuck, and you work with them for a half hour, they could hit a 50, 60, 70 pound PR sometimes. You can't do that on the bench. You certainly can't do it on the deadlift. Well, maybe on the deadlift if it's really bad, but it's like the squat is like the king of, I can be the greatest coach in the world.
Well, going back to the point with the deadlift and back to like talking about, I think we're talking about, like mental cues. Well, sometimes if you have like just with the deadlift, especially if somebody believes they can lift the weight and they don't know what weight's on the bar, a lot of times they hit some big PRs. So, I've seen this with like some of the seminars who just keep adding weight and all of a sudden they don't even know what they're lifting, and, you're putting it on so they know that they can lift it. So they think they can lift it, and sure, so it's just
So that's how you got that over 8 pull. He misloaded that shit on you.
Yeah, right. I think an important part with the leading indicators on all the lifts is knowing your weaknesses, because like with bench press, it just depends where you're weak. Because so I'm generally strong off my chest, especially relatively so since I tore my tricep. So a buffalo bar press, cambered bar press is not going to be a good leading indicator for me, whereas a board press will be, because it's my lockout that's a problem, whereas some people it's the opposite. And same with when I got my squat better doing a lot of front squats and high bar squats because my quads were a weak point, my posterior chain was relatively strong. So but other people may have the opposite. So I think that's kind of important when you find a leading indicator lift.
Yeah, and weaknesses are, you got to address the weaknesses. There's no doubt about that. The trick, I think, is you can't do that at the expense of your strengths.
Yeah.
There's like 2 main schools of thought when it comes to powerlifting, and one is, only work your strengths, and the other one is you got to pound your weaknesses, or the answer is kind of in the middle, because if you stop training your strength, good luck come meet day.
Right.
It's kind of, in business, let's say you're in business, if we were having a consulting session on business and I said, Dan, look, man, here's what you got to do. Everything that you're really good at, fucking stop doing.
Yeah.
So you're taking your competitive advantages and just throwing it out the window. It's just the balance is in there. But I do think that, as you said, people don't look hard enough. You see that pendulum swing every year or two, and it's really, really weird if you're watching what people are writing about and so forth. It's like, okay, now it's all about working the strengths, and here we go, it's all about working the weaknesses, and it's just like nothing's fun, nothing's new.
How about doing both?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you start speaking and educating and talking right down that middle, you're almost ignored.
Right.
Because people don't want to hear that.
Well, people want to hear the extremes.
Yeah.
And that goes for politics and everything else.
What's the fancy exercise,
Yes.
That's going to be the silver
Right.
bullet.
Yes. They don't want to hear the truth.
Right.
The painful truth. Did you see any other ones in here that were of interest to you that you remember? I'll flip through.
You can check through there. I know there's some questions about a lot of questions about sumo mobility.
Okay, let's go
So
there.
some questions of stretching. No, I think this is an interesting one just for the simple, there's kind of a hidden thing here, which is, anybody can stretch their groin. You can, do all kinds of stretches where you're opening up the hips, creating some external rotation. But when you actually pull a weight, the flexibility is second in importance to basically the strength of your hip abductors. So basically the glute medius. I was a gymnast before, and I had a really, really hard time learning how to pull sumo, even though I was flexible. I could almost do the splits in the middle. So it didn't help me that I was flexible. It didn't hurt me, but it didn't help me because I didn't have the hip strength to kind of keep the knees open, and therefore, all that weight that you're pulling up on needs to get transferred to your legs. If somebody says sumo's cheating because you're just squatting the weight up, well, in order to squat the weight up, you've got to load the weight into your legs. And if your hips can't transfer the weight to your legs, good luck. It's not going to work. It's going to be a stiff leg deadlift once you can't squat the weight up.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing for me is, and I've, it's in there the block pulls sumo. It's just an easy way to put yourself in a better position, handle a lot more weight for a lot more reps, and basically build up the strength of the hips. And kind of the hidden secret here is that as you do that, your body is more flexible than you realize. Weights are a great way to build flexibility, but a muscle can only stretch if it's not tensing up, and so if you're unstable and you start tensing up the groin, well, it doesn't matter if it's flexible when it's relaxed. If it tenses up, it's not gonna be flexible. It's probably gonna start hurting.
Yes.
So somebody else asked about groin pain for sumos, and that's what it comes down to. It's not a groin issue; it's the strength of the hips. So the block pulls are a really great way because every time you pick the weight up or squat the weight up, you've got to pull tension with your back that transfers down to your legs, and your hips transfer the weight. So that's kind of the big secret for those ones.
I think one thing that people don't think enough about, and I know I didn't, but I do now because my joints are all fucked up. So it's kind of led me down a path where I have to think more things like this. Isometrics are going to work within 10, 15 degrees plus or minus whatever range of motion you're in. So that would be true with static holds. It would be true with yielding, and in a way it's going to be true with the block pulls and stuff like that. So if you're pulling off 2 inches, that should also work the strength plus or minus 10, 15 degrees. Yeah. So if you're dealing with somebody that's tight and they feel that they need to open that tightness up, they don't have to go to that threshold to open that up. They can go into the threshold, come right out of it by, say, 5 degrees, so there's no pain, but then they actually are working 10 degrees more into that threshold, so they don't have that pain that's associated with that. And from a strength standpoint, that applies. From a yielding standpoint, that applies. From an injury standpoint, rehab, with, crap that you're dealing with, stuff like that. And when you went through rehab, there's a reason why, they say stay out of pain, work here. And then you're like, well, shit, now I got more range of motion. But meanwhile, if you cranked it, you could have got there, but at the risk of more damage, right. And why? If it's going to work within that 10, 15 degrees, then you can go that way. The other thing with movements that are being, the belt squat's a good example. A lot of people do belt squats because of the distraction of the lower back. And I agree, it has distraction of the lower back. But that belt is also pushing your hip girdle into your femur. Yeah. So the distraction of your lower back comes at the risk of jamming the femur into the hip girdle for countless number of repetitions. So there's a trade-off to where, anytime you're going to have distraction, there's going to be compression somewhere. If it's a hanging leg raise, that's distracting, except for your shoulder, that's being jammed back into the joint because you're holding it. It's everything's got a cost, benefit type thing. And people will look at the benefit, but I don't think they look at the cost, or vice versa. Yeah. Sometimes there's things that may be really bad, but if you look at the counter of that, it's exactly what you need to do. And the mobility, flexibility kind of all falls into that really weird sphere where you got lifters that have to maintain a certain degree of tightness just for stretch reflex and explosiveness. I mean, coming in as a gymnast, holy shit, you could be hypermobile, which creates a problem because now it's too far. Every sport, I think, has its optimal level of flexibility, mobility, and stability. Stability being key for all of it. That's another one that gets left out a lot. I don't care how mobile you are or how flexible you are. If you can't stabilize something, you're fucked.
Well, that's a good example. I'm saying with the hips, it's like if you can't stabilize the hips, they're not going to be able to be flexible.
Yes.
With squatting, same kind of thing. You want to squat deeper. Well, if you lose stability of the weight, your legs are going to tense up, and you're going to, so if you can create a lot of stability with the upper body, your abs and your back and your upper back, if you control the weight, well, now it's going to be a lot easier to go lower. The weight's helping push your hips down. But if you're like wobbling all over the place and your legs are regaining their balance, as you go down, if they're tensing up to control your balance, they're not going to also be able to simultaneously like relax into a deep squat, into a stretch.
It's a great point. Same
so
thing
it's like
happens on the bench.
It's like the division of labor that your upper body creates stability, your lower body first creates the flexibility to get down, and then power to come up. The moment your lower body on the way up has to stop providing power to stabilize, well, now you lose all your momentum. You've got to like grind through. Mm-hmm. So if the upper body can create a ton of stability, this is where a lot of guys can, some guys have big legs and that's where they squat a lot, but some guys have big upper bodies and not so big of legs and that's where they squat a lot. Just create a ton of stability for the bar. Mm-hmm. If everyone had like easy time stabilizing the weight, we would all squat what we leg press, right? And it's because we can't stabilize the weight as easily as a machine does. So
exactly. Any other ones? Did you get anything that came through on the live?
Yeah, there's some coming through right now. Let's see. So what are Dan Green's auxiliary lifts for conventional?
For conventional?
That's what that said.
He pulls sumo.
Yeah.
So that's a quick. I can answer that one.
I mean, just
Is he asking, does he use conventional as an auxiliary exercise for his sumo? Well, that's what we're going to answer. So go.
Yeah, I mean, like last year I spent a lot of time training, or 2017 and early 18, I spent a lot of time training just conventional. When I was doing that, I did a lot of pause deadlifts, which I like for building just time under tension and building a lot of muscle mass in the back. I did a lot of bent over rows, and as always, I always do a lot of deficit pulls and a lot of deficit stiff legs and some good mornings. For sumo, I mean, I do sumo pulls from the floor and from blocks, and then I do all the same conventional. I usually just don't have heavy ones off the floor if I'm doing the sumo pulls heavy. So a lot of times it'll be deficit pulls, stiff legs, and good mornings. They're all still there. A lot of, and I think of bent over rows as more of like a lower back exercise, like not so much of like a lat exercise, but more just like a direct deadlift assistance exercise. So all the same things are just building up back strength, whether it was training for sumo or for conventional. I think that's
yeah.
That's kind of the simple thing for anyone to take away. It's like sumo is not an excuse to avoid a lot of conventional deadlifting. That's a bad approach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the conventional can work the back.
I mean,
which is the prime driver of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing like 3 days a week training back. Once maybe stiff legs or good mornings, once doing a lot of bent over rows. Then the heavy day, I'm actually deadlifting, and that's really the only day if I was training sumo that I would be doing the sumo pulls. So
let's talk more about that, because I do feel the back is the engine of the power lifter. You can almost not train everything else, but just pound the shit out of your back 4 times a week and still be strong. So how often do you guys address your back, and from what angles? And like, do you do vertical rows and horizontal rows on the same day? Or the face pulls and stuff like that, would you consider that back, or is that more shoulder crap? Where's all that fit in?
So for me, as far as the whole range of the back, like with good mornings, I find benefit in doing both. Sometimes a barbell good morning where the stress is on kind of the low bar position, but the safety bar is also really good because it puts it higher. It just makes it a lot harder, and you have to really keep your thoracic spine tense for that. I like the basics, so barbell bent over rows, dumbbell rows, pull-ups. Those are kind of my 3 staples. And I usually train upper body twice a week, and so on both of those upper body days, I'll do upper back training of some sort, and I'll usually do at least 1 horizontal pull and 1 vertical pull.
Same.
I used to basically train like rows or pull-ups every workout. So this could be like 5 or 6 times a week. That worked really well to build up kind of like upper back strength and, lats and traps and stuff. But I think what I think about, is trying to build up my deadlift. I have, like after my squat days on Monday, I'll do some kind of, like I said, either good mornings or stiff leg deadlifts. On Tuesday, I would come back and either I would do like basically a bodybuilding back day, but starting either with heavy bent over rows or heavy T-bar rows. The one I have is kind of like a T-bar chest supported row, but it really puts a lot of stress on the mid and upper back. And then on Friday, I deadlift. And so that's where I'm either doing some really heavy lifts plus some volume, or I'm just, like if I did the pause deadlifts, that's just building up a lot of volume. So I'm getting and the way I look at it is this kind of like, the heavy, light, medium, or the DUP style where, on Monday I'm doing good mornings or stiff legs. These are like moderately heavy weights. If a good morning is like 400 plus pounds, or a stiff leg deadlift is 500 to 600, or maybe a little higher, versus a deadlift, which might be over 700 pounds, there's a relative, scale there. And then when I do the bent over rows, I mean, that's going to be like right around 400 pounds, maybe a little higher, maybe a little bit lower. So that's like the lightest lower back workout. So I'm hitting the lower back for the deadlifting, up to 3 times a week like that. We're even sometimes doing like 2 real deadlifting workouts in a week, plus stiff legs. So I like to train like deadlifting specific exercises 2 to 3 times a week. But as far as doing like pull-ups and rows, I think kind of just the more the better with those ones. When I was saying now on a Tuesday workout, I'll kind of do like a bodybuilding day. The first exercise is heavy, but then I'm doing, pull-ups or pull-downs or cable rows, things where I can just add in a lot of reps and stuff and just.
Have you found once you're acclimated to that it's really hard to make yourself sore if you're training auxiliary back work?
The one thing I think about that's important with that is kind of one that each lift that you're kind of proficient in gives you a new tool where you can then kind of more to the point have enough variation in. I mean, because they're kind of boring exercises to do a bunch of like 4 sets of 10 on the rows, or it's boring and it takes a lot of motivation to like push yourself to do it. But I think it's it's important, and so that's where I like to like vary it. I'm not doing the same. Like the simpler the exercise, the more variation you need to kind of cycle through. So I just have sort of, have pull-ups with different grips, pull-ups with weights, dumbbell one-arm rows, dumbbell chest-supported rows, the T-bar chest-supported rows, bent-over rows with the bar. So I have a good sort of number of exercises in the arsenal. That way I don't have to like constantly do the same thing over and over again. They all kind of target the same thing though.
Yeah.
And then with each one of those, you can add in the variation of with or without straps. So I rarely use straps, but it's every now and then I'll do it if I really want to just focus on, the mind-muscle connection with my back. And as you asked, my upper back, if I train it frequently enough, I don't really feel sore in it anymore. The lower back or the spinal erectors, I can still feel some soreness in those, but just because of the higher load, I think, from squats and deadlifts. And one other thing I keep in mind with back training is I think you can do it pretty frequently, but I will try not to do it within 1 to 2 days at least of if I'm going to have a big deadlift workout, because I want to have my back pretty fresh for deadlifting, being that's such an important lift to me.
You said something that stuck out to me. I want to circle back to it a little bit. You said on the days that you use the straps, you do that to work on the mind-muscle connection a little more. So you're not putting the straps on to lift more weight. You're putting the straps on to be able to feel your back more.
Both. Yeah,
Okay.
actually both. Yeah. So like with bent over rows, I can go heavier because then it takes out the grip limiting factor. But some other things, it's kind of simultaneous, because at the same time, if I'm not thinking about gripping the bar, I'm just thinking about pulling my elbows towards the ceiling if it's a row, and just really just focusing on my lats and rhomboids and all that.
I think it's an important thing to put out there for the listeners, viewers, or however they're seeing this to really understand, is because the back it's not like your biceps or your chest. It's not like something that's really easy to start training and feel. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to be able to isolate, feel your lats, so using the straps is an interesting way. It's actually a good way, if you think about it, to where if you're a beginner or a newbie, to take the grip out of it and to focus more on the things that you're talking about, driving the elbows back and that kind of stuff, so they can actually train their lats instead of shrug bicep combo.
Yeah,
which is what it is.
Shrug, hammer curl. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I think about too, and there was a question there about like how do you become muscular, with powerlifting versus bodybuilding stuff. And one thing I like to think about is we use the word intensity specifically to talk about like a percent of max, but I think anybody who's lifted weights, you can sort of think, okay, intensity is when lactic acid is building up, or you're getting out of breath, or it's the weights just feeling like it's on your traps and crushing you. So fatigue is a big part of intensity to me. I mean, any bodybuilder thinks about how intensely do you train, and I've always been inspired by like the Dorian Yates videos. And I think about both kind of the heavy compound lifting as like his style, where it's like I'm going to do one set of 6 or 8 reps, and it's going to be to the point of like really taxing myself. So I like that, because I think that means that I'm using powerlifting lifts in a bodybuilding style, the way that one of the most effective bodybuilders did his training. So I like that. I think that's a really good way to build a lot of strength in weak areas, because a lot of these lifts are ones where I'm trying to use harder leverages, like a safety squat bar or a front squat or a stiff leg deadlift. You're not holding your back tight. You're having to stabilize in an awkward position. you're getting pulled out of position. The other thing that I think is relevant for both the heavier lifting and then especially for the accessory lifting, like if you're doing, high reps on rows or something, is that as the discomfort and it builds up, the perceived intensity builds up, what do you do at that point? Because anybody could tell you going into the set, okay, when it gets hard, keep using the same cues, the same tempo, but once your like emotional reaction to this is fucking hard kicks in, which is also what makes the sport so challenging, because not everyone has the toughness to be this way, but a little discipline goes a long way. When the weights start feeling heavier, muscles are screaming, you're getting out of breath, do you concentrate and make the quality just as good, or do you rush to try to get it over with? Is like getting the sets of 12 over, getting 12 reps is like an arbitrary goal. So it's like, do you get 8 good reps and 4 bad ones, or do you get those last 4 to be, once you're out of your comfort zone, to kind of use the cliche, is what you do when you're out of your comfort zone building higher quality, or is it like it's just getting it over with?
Yeah, I think that.
And really, like, if we say nothing really changes until we kind of stress ourselves to get out of the comfort zone, well, that's where it's like, once you're out of your comfort zone, what do? Do you focus? Do you push yourself? Or do you, you kind of like let the emotion like take over and discipline is gone?
I think the key to being, I loosely use the term successful powerlifter, but the key to being the best powerlifter somebody can be, for themselves, is the ability to be able to think while they strain.
Sure.
Because a lot of people just get in that rage, then they get stuck, say halfway in a pull, and all they need to do is fucking push their hips forward.
Yeah,
but they're
focus
stuck
on the wrong thing, basically.
and they just arch, and they, at that point, they're not going to hear any verbal cues.
Yeah.
They need to know, oh, I'm stuck, hips, and then go. The only way you know that is to kind of live there long enough to have it click, where it's like, because once you do it once, you're like, oh shit, why haven't I been doing that? Then it's a whole nother world.
Like a lot of people, if you have them do like, let's say a set of 5 on the bench or a set of 5 on squats, where do you think you're going to get tired? Well, after rep 4, obviously. And so that's, where something with training, I can tell, people I'm training, like, okay, you're always going to get tired after rep 4. So when you're squatting, make sure you take an extra breath and brace, and then still attack the rep. Or when you bench, do you rush and like drop it on your chest too quickly, or do you actually get tight and kind of control it and just set yourself up and have the trust that by putting the bar in the right spot and staying tight, you're going to be able to push it back up, versus, oh shit, it's getting hard, I better speed up. And then, you move fast, but then the moment you try to push up, you're hitting a hard sticking point. So I think it's like, what do you have to focus on, and kind of the discipline to know, like, okay, it's okay to be tired. It's okay for this to feel hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it, right? It's not. So
Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you said about the ability to think while you're straining really hits home to me, because the first 5 meets I did were sleeves, totally raw squats, and prior to that, just sports training. I didn't know anything about wraps. So when I got into wraps, 2.5 years ago, it was brand new to me, and I found there's different technical cues that are really important with wraps. And so while with a sleeve squat, and say a deadlift, which I'd done plenty of times before, I could use like nose torque or ammonia and get very psyched up for the lift. I purposely did not use that for wrap squats because I wanted to keep my mind more focused and calmer, actually, which is ironic because the weight was so heavy, but still I wanted to think about pushing my hips forward, sinking into the wraps at the bottom, and not just be in this kind of like blind rage.
Yeah, I think for like something I think about too with the squatting is this, like, especially with wraps, when I'm going to do my max, especially like a third attempt at a meet, the things I want to think about are, I'm going to unrack it and feel like, I don't know if I'm going to come up with this weight.
Yeah.
I know I've prepared for it, but this feels, it's heavy.
Just because it feels heavy,
and I've never done it
you
before.
can't do it.
So, you have to remember, like, what are the right things to think about, and what are the, all the distractions. So to me, it's like a couple cues that I just focus on, which are not like micromanaging body parts, but it's just like, get the weight, and take my time, get a really strong full breath of air, brace hard until I'm like basically trembling, and then make sure that my balance sits hard on the heels, so I'm not bracing and then rocking on the toes and then rushing into the squat.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do all those things, get the air, brace really hard, let the weight sink in down to my heels,
Push the knees out.
but then once I'm there, I attack the descent. So I do everything to set myself up for success, but I still need to attack it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. When you're afraid of the weight, do you attack it, or do you kind of quit before it even happens?
Yeah.
Ed Cohen was talking about that. If you change your descent, because it feels heavy,
Fucked.
when you make these like last minute adjustments on your strategy, that's where you already lost. So.
Yeah, I mean I would say you should just rack it and call it a day, but
you gotta learn the lessons.
Yeah, most lifters I know won't do that.
You don't get better.
But that's why I said you can tell
failures and challenges.
I can tell as soon as they pick the bar, man. As soon as it comes on their back, you've been around long enough, you can see right in their eyes. Sometimes it's be like, oh shit, okay, wait, there it is. It like flips over, and you can tell, man. It's just I like when I go to the XPC Saturday. I'll find somebody. We'll be betting in the. Is that legal? Be betting in the back. Like, here's $1. This dude's gonna miss this, guaranteed. And kind of go that route. Now I know you just had a meet this past weekend. How'd that go?
It was going great. I mean,
as far as running a meet, I should specify.
Yeah, it's gone really good. This was our 15th meet that we've hosted at our gym since we've opened the gym almost 6 years ago, and basically the first one was 2014. So we've been putting on an average of 3 a year, and I think especially the last 5, they've just been going like clockwork. We have a guy at our gym. He runs openpowerlifting.org, and he's also kind of come up with the new software that replaces NextLifter, which is obviously really dated.
Mm-hmm.
And we used that for the first time at this meet. And so that even helped just the spotters and everything to go smoother, and that was a huge difference because this was almost like 100 people in the meet with 2 platforms. The meet was done on one platform in 4 hours. On the other platform, it was like maybe closer to 5. So one side had faster spotters and loaders, but
yeah,
I mean, even a 5-hour meet for having like more than 45 people on one side, very, very, very.
You
cool.
can always slow it down. That's the thing about meets. You can always slow it down, but if it's running forever,
some meets are 10 hours.
Hard. Yeah, that sucks. It's not.
Once you realize it doesn't have to be 10 hours, it's like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
I can go get some food afterwards. I'm not just totally exhausted.
Well, it's providing the environment to give the lifter the best day.
Yeah, not just that, but like I think about we promote meets, and right now I'm basically the president for the WRPF in the USA. And so I think about, how do you make the meets more interesting, like promoting, in other words. And so do you want to watch a meet that's going to be, 10 hours? No. Do you want to watch a meet that's, highlighting really good lifters in a shorter amount of time? Yeah, that's obvious, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's also where I like the elite, like forward-facing monolift, and, it makes it better to view it when you don't have a bunch of people and equipment in front.
Metal in the way.
Powerlifting is a slow sport. So if you're not like thinking, how do we at least make it better to view? It's like, I don't know.
Well, that's
to me,
the
that's
crazy
obvious
thing
to
with,
think about.
because I'll tune into a lot of live streams of different meets, and I've been in this sport since 82, 83. And I turn this shit off. I get so I don't like meets to begin with, but if there's lifters I know that are lifting, I want to watch them. But it's like, fuck, some of these are just like paint drying. It's so slow, and then there's somebody's ass in the way of the camera, and it's just, why bother? Where if it's faster, or at least with this different software that you're talking about, you might be able to have better graphics to be able to say when people are going to be coming up. So if people are watching the live stream, say you're competing and I want to watch you compete. Well, I know roughly if you're done squatting, I can go somewhere, get something to eat, come back in an hour or so.
Yeah, I mean,
you should be about up, check it on my phone or whatnot, and have that rhythm, a certain cadence, where a lot of the other meets that I've tried to watch live stream, it's almost impossible to predict when the next attempt is going to be sometimes.
Yeah. And that, like, I have friends, coworkers, family members who've said, "Oh, Andrew, when's your next competition? I want to come watch." And I'm grateful for that, but I almost cringe too because of this exact thing. I'm like, you realize this is a long day. This could be a long day. It could be not pretty disorganized. Yeah. You could be waiting forever to see me lift and stuff like that. So, a really smoothly run, efficient meet is a blessing.
It's huge.
And not to mention, I think, the unsung heroes of every meet are the spotters and loaders. I've done that before, and arguably that's harder than competing in the long run as far as total volume. And so, the spotters and loaders don't want to be out there 10, 11 hours, so it's better for them.
In comparison, I mean, you wrestled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wrestling tournaments are hell.
Yeah.
So
all day.
I mean, all my kids are in sports. Any sport tournament just sucks. So it's kind of, it's not that far off. But if you can trim it down, to at least make it like 5 hours is almost perfect for a lifter.
But think about it too. Like, we have a meet. We're in Northern California. If somebody's coming from like Reno or Northern California or LA, or even like, if you end at 5, they could drive home.
Yeah.
You end at 10 at night, and it's like that
another
sucks.
cost. Yeah, it's another cost.
I mean, how you don't want to drive in the middle of the night to get back. That's so much better for the people who, are like so dedicated they want to drive 5 hours to a meet.
So what's the next one?
The next one we have basically Boss of NorCal. It's the USAPL meet. That's in May, and then we have Boss of Bosses 6 will be at the end of August, and then we'll have one more USAPL meet in November.
Which one would you say is the primary focus? Is it Boss of Bosses for you? Is that the one that you try to push the hardest for the best lifters?
We put the most work into like promoting that one.
Mm-hmm.
The Boss of NorCals are really appealing to a lot of people. It's like a sort of a meet where you can be a novice, you can come in, you can be a novice and lift in a really well-run meet. And that can kind of prepare you to qualify for like a nationals or something like that. Boss of Bosses has the format where we usually have 2 days, one with anybody can sign up. We don't want people to sign up as their first meet ever, because that makes it a little risky for the spotters when they're all of a sudden, what if somebody like dumps the bar because they didn't know any better. So we don't want people doing their very first meet as that one. But and then the second day is always a day where we invite people. So either people who have, totals that qualify, or people who I think are up and coming, and I want to invite them to the meet because I'm trying to promote the sport. So it's just a really good opportunity to just put together all the best that the sport has to offer. Try to make it fun for the athletes, make it fun for people watching, fun for the, people who are attending to watch, like spectators, or even the people who lifted the first day and now want to watch, lifters that they look up to on the second day.
So this will, for the Boss of Bosses, it's going to be the 6th or 7th?
6th this year.
Sixth.
It
So
takes a lot of prep for us, for sure.
that way, that's invitation meet. There's not a whole lot of other invitation meets that have lasted 6 years.
That's a good point.
So that speaks volumes, for the job that you're doing, taking care of the lifters, because invitation meets come down to where do the lifters want to go, bottom line.
Yeah.
You can invite whoever you want, but they're still going to have an expense to be able to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you're a business. You have a huge business. It's and it's impressive. And what I think about is, as a business, how do you create value?
Yes.
If you don't create value, you're just copying something else, right? And so, we want to, do something where it's like, it's not, so weird that people don't get it, but it's also our own. It's our own style, So we don't try to just do things that other people do because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I want to have my own sort of image for, or, kind of like vision for a meet. And I think by doing it consistently year in and year out, like that's what's made it stand the test of time. So it's a quality meet. We do our best to take care of the lifters. We're not just asking them to just do us a favor. Hey, come to our meet. It's
Yeah.
like, we put out prize money. We help people get to the meet. Sometimes we're helping them pay for their flights and, their hotels. We make it as, I think, we have our own personal touches. We've always had it with like a banquet afterwards. And we've had, some years we do a little bit different things. We had like one year with like a athlete like press conference the night before. So I think it's just a matter of, we want to run a really good meet. So when people come, they have a good time. And, I want it to be original in the sense that like when we have ideas, we want to implement them.
Well, I think you're doing a phenomenal job, because the top lifters that I know now there's already buzz, about them wanting to do that, because they're trying to figure, because there's a few meets that all kind of happen in the same 2-3 month time period. I don't necessarily think they're really competing because they are far enough apart, but they are. It's people can say what they want, but they're not. Very few are going to enter all three or 2 or whatever it is. So it seems like, from what I'm hearing, yours is the one that is getting the most buzz right now at the top level. But the other thing, which is really cool, is the things that I've seen and heard about the meet you just did this last weekend, which is catered more towards beginners in the sport, is really good.
There's some really good lifters too, so it's kind of like,
yeah. So
you know,
you're
total
covering,
range.
you're covering the full spectrum though. You know, from people who don't know anything about the sport, it's their first meet. You're making them feel comfortable, making them feel welcome. You bring them into the sport. Then on the other end of the coin, you're taking the people that have been around 10, 15 years that are putting, you know, powerlifting is, I don't want to say it's their life, but they do shit that could kill them to be able to get ready for the meet, you know, and you're taking care of them to where they're like, yeah, I feel comfortable going there, you know, which that's a testament to what you're doing with your gym and company and everything associated with that. So when you can cover that full spectrum, you know, you're killing it. So
yeah. I mean, and there's, you know, it's been cool because we've seen other meets that have come up and they kind of cater to that same like element of like, let's make a really top meet. And I think that's good. You know, I don't look at it as competition. Like I need to, you know, like turn my back on them. I'm like, you know, if you could go to a meet and the cash prizes are dramatically higher, you should do that. You know, how many people have a chance to make some money doing, you know,
not many,
doing their training and lifting? That's pretty awesome. Like I said, for us, it's like, you know, we're going to try to do what we think is right. So we put on good meets that are going to consistently, you know, build the reputation that people enjoy being at the meets.
yeah,
You know, like I said, if you put your best effort in and you have a good vision, you have some certain things that you value, that's all you can do. You know, we're not trying to copy other people. You know, I think that's what it is. It's just doing what we think is best year in and year out, and you know, that's how it's you know, 6 years in a row. So
great. All right, I think we're going to shut this down.
Did you want to go with any more questions on here?
Oh, I'm good.
All right. Let me.
No, I was going to say she's probably ready to eat.